Hey, sorry, I know it's been a while, but we're gonna get started with Bordeaux and go over a few things here. I actually have my map, if I can get it up. Map of Bordeaux here. That I can barely hold. So it's in it's in southwest France, and it has a maritime climate, which again means that it's just influenced by a large body of water. And for Bordeaux, that large body of water here is the Atlantic River. The Atlantic Ocean. Can you tell that I haven't had enough coffee today? Atlantic Ocean, and then it comes here into this estuary that leads into two different rivers here, and it's the Dordogne and Garonne River. And then this center part here, this center area here that I have all in orange in the map is called the Entre-Deux-Mers, which pretty much translates to like between two seas, and it's right between those two rivers. And then we have the right bank and the left bank. Left bank is kind of separated into the Medoc here, and then Grape underneath here. Right bank, we're mostly just talking about, today we'll talk about a few little areas, like you should know Pomerol and Le Long de Pomerol is really what we'll focus on. Up here, we have a lot of like really well-known wines made up here. Down in Grape, there's more of those like dessert wines that we'll talk about in just a moment. Don't fall. Ah, there we go. So Bordeaux, everyone knows it, everyone loves it. We all know that it's like super expensive wines. And remember that when we get into some classifications in a minute here. But really what we know is like, it's really well known for red wines. It's not all that they produce, but when someone says, hey, I really love Bordeaux, we kind of assume that they're talking about a red blend. So what are those main grape varieties that we need to know is like Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc. There are several others. Those are the main three that you really need to focus on. And if you're looking at your study guide here, you can see that like a majority, like 22% of the red varieties planted there is actually Cabernet Sauvignon. And in the, I'm not going to pick that up again, in the left bank, it's mostly like Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot based blends. Right bank is mostly Cabernet Franc and Merlot based blends. And one of my favorite like, tasting notes to kind of differentiate between the two when you're blind tasting them, I learned this in a tasting group several years ago because I really messed up and couldn't tell the difference between left and right bank. And there was someone in my group who asked me, they said, do you taste more dark fruits like purple and black fruits, or do you taste more red fruits? And in that case, I tasted more like purple and black fruits, and we were tasting a left bank. It was a Côte de Tournelle. I think it's like a 89 Côte de Tournelle. Amazing wine. Anyway, those darker fruits, typically more what you see in the Cabernet Sauvignon based blends, and more red fruit dominant in the Cabernet Franc based blends, and that's just kind of my favorite tasting note to help differentiate there. Yes, they also have white wines. We'll get into that. Sometimes you might have some guests who are like, hey, I really love Bordeaux Blanc. It's not that often, but you will get those requests. Not so much like sparkling Bordeaux, because no one really ever talks about it. And if they want dessert wine, they're probably people who know at least a little bit about it, and you can have some fun conversations about that. Oh, and one of the biggest things that you really need to know when you're first learning about these wines is like a little bit more of the history of how Bordeaux became like what it is today. And like, long story short, a bunch of the Dutch came there, kind of messed with the land, drained it. But one of the weirdest things with Bordeaux is, you know, we had the whole classification systems that were created all over France. Burgundy classified things by the land, and Bordeaux was like, we're going to classify it by producers. And the most annoying thing about it is that it was based on market value of the time. But we don't have to talk about that right now. The most important thing for you to know, because regardless of if you plan on working with like luxury wine or not, it's still really important to at least be familiar with all of these. So make sure that you do know and are familiar enough with the first growths. And that is Chateau Latour, Lafite Rothschild, Mouton Rothschild, Margaux, and Haut-Brion. And I'll be honest, like I haven't had all of these. Some of them are really incredible wines. They're very expensive. I've never spent my own money on it. But they are well made. But the thing is, they were, the way that they became first growths is kind of a wild story. And 4 out of the 5 of those are all in the Medoc. Haut-Brion is actually in Grape, and that's just an important little note for you to know. All right, so when we talk about the subregions, again, we have the Medoc, and this is, I've heard a lot of people claim that like wines of the Medoc are the greatest wines in France and thus like the greatest wines in the entire world. And you'll hear things like that, and you know, it depends like who people talk to and who they learned from and whatnot. And French people are really funny about it too, because a lot of them believe that Bordeaux is like the greatest wines ever, and then you go visit anywhere else in the country and they're just like, no, our wines are better, and it's really funny. But like some of the most important things to know there is, yes, most of the first growth like reds are from the Medoc, and the main grape varieties grown there are Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon. And a really interesting thing about that is the soil there is very like gravelly, which is actually really great for growing Cabernet Sauvignon. Really important appellations to know: Saint-Estèphe, Pauillac, Saint-Julien, and Margaux. And you know, I'm just gonna pop a map up here again. There are several others. Those are just the most important ones to know right now. And when you're first studying this region, because there's so much to know, especially with all of the history and all of the like classifications and second labels from all of these well-known producers, it's a lot to go with and a lot to feel like you need to memorize, and some of it's really not as necessary. So when you're first diving into it, these are my recommendations of what to be familiar with. So directly south of Medoc is Grape, and this is also a lot of Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot based blends. We also have a lot of dessert wines produced here, and Sauternes is the most popular one, or at least the most well-known, but there are several others. That's just the one that I would recommend you focus on right now. And then from there, grow in your knowledge of this region and of their dessert wines. And a really important thing to know with the dessert wines is the grape varieties, because we use Sémillon, Sauvignon Blanc, and Muscadelle. Sémillon's really the most used, the most popular variety of those, then a little bit of Sauvignon Blanc. And Sémillon is really interesting because it has these like really nice floral notes, but it's not overwhelming. It's not like perfume or potpourri kind of like. It's more subtle. It's a gorgeous grape variety. It's also used in a lot of white Bordeaux blends that are dry table wines. And the biggest thing with the dessert wines here, they are botrytis affected. So if you remember from learning about wine growing and winemaking, botrytis is this type of bunch rot that affects the grapes, but when it's somewhat controlled in a way, it produces these wines that have these incredible like ginger, marmalade, honey kind of notes to it. Really intense, really beautiful wines. And this is one of the areas that's really well known for that. The reason they're so great here is because of those rivers. So make sure you remember that. And when you take a look at the map here, you'll see that there is a river running right through, like kind of some areas where they produce these dessert wines are north or south of that river, just like directly by it. Then right bank Bordeaux, that's again a lot of like Cabernet Franc and Merlot based blends. Saint-Emilion and Pomerol are some of the most well-known appellations within the right bank, and they both produce a lot of like Merlot and Cabernet Franc based blends. Pomerol is very well known. The wines there are really expensive. The land is so expensive, and it's the region sits on it's like really special soil. It's called Classe de Fer, and it's this mix of like sand and iron oxide, and it's phenomenal for growing Merlot. And the wines they're very expensive. They're great, but I mean, it's like $400 a bottle, kind of expensive. And the soil is different, but a region by it is like Le Land de Pomerol, and you can usually find wines for a really good like bang for your buck there. So that's something that I would keep an eye out if you are someone who's working with a wine list and you want to have some more Bordeaux wines but a little bit more budget friendly. That's a great one to focus on. And really, like, the last thing I want to talk about is just the Entre-Deux-Mers, and it's like just a lot of dry white blends, great wines like, again, Semillon, Sauvignon Blanc, and Muscadelle. And that's really all I want to get into with this video because, again, Bordeaux is so intense with the amount of history that you have to learn and all the different regions and the classifications with all these different producers and all the different labels that they make. The vintages are really important, especially when you're working in a place that carries a lot of these, because let's be honest, Bordeaux drinkers are very obsessed with Bordeaux, and if you don't know what you're talking about with them, it's gonna be rough. Let's be honest. Like, they know their wines. These are people who are like wine collectors. They've been there so many times. They have wines from Bordeaux that are like 60 plus years old. I've had guests come in and bring in a couple special bottles, and then, you know, they want to talk to me because they're like, hey, I want to, you know, share this wine with someone who can really appreciate it, and they get really excited about it, and they might like have you blind taste some of them and all things like that. But it is important to know some of this so that you can have those conversations with them, even if it's not really your favorite thing, because, you know, luxury wines are not really my favorite thing, but I definitely enjoy it when it's coming out of someone else's pocket and not my own. But yeah, really fun people, great wines. Don't be too hard on yourself with trying to memorize like every growth and every second label of everything, because you're not going to remember all of it. Nobody does. It just kind of comes with time and more just experience. And yeah, it's helpful to remember those things for a test, for like a certification. But long term, try to remember to learn like basics of these places. Start working with the wines if you can in any way, and that's really where you're going to learn most of it. And have a little bit more fun with it. Make it all like conversational and more interesting for you, because the more interested you are in whatever you can find, like if there's some little piece of information that you find really interesting, just run with it, because you can have a completely different conversation about the same wine with any sommelier, and it's going to go all different directions because we all have our different interests, and that's what makes it so great. So if you're just like, hey, I love this one specific appellation and I'm going to learn everything there is about it. I love this one producer. I'm going to learn about all their history of this. I love learning about vintages and the different like conditions and all these different years from whatever couple decades, whatever it is, just get whatever it is that gets you excited. Like just go with it. Okay, and enjoy it, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.